Wrinkle in Time is the new Disney blockbuster directed by Ava DuVernay that tells the story of a young girl whose father goes missing and with her brother and best friend goes on an adventure to go find him through space and time.
Yep.
So, Nate, let's just get into the performances of this. I mean, you have three child actors kind of leading the pack here. I mean, there's some supporting performances from adults in there, but for the most part, it's on these three kids. And what'd you think?
I think for the most part, these kids held their own. I think that there's one in particular where he's the youngest of the three. And at first I was like, oh, this kid's doing a pretty good job. And then I grew tired of him pretty quickly. About halfway through the movie, I was like, this kid is giving... They gave him all the lines. Like, they gave him the meat of this movie, and they shouldn't have put that on his shoulders because he just bothered me. At about halfway mark, I was like, oh, God, would you just stop giving these kids so much to work with? Because it was just too much for me.
Yeah, he was a charming side character at first, but then the charm wore thin, and then once the movie started to progress, I was getting to that moment too where I'm like, wow, they're putting a lot of this movie on this kid's shoulders with his performance. And I just feel like the performance wore thin and it failed, and also with this particular character, there's kind of a turn and a twist to the character in the third act, and I didn't buy it.
I didn't buy it for a second.
And then, once again, just more dialogue with that character. I'm like, wow, they're really hinging it on this kid. And it didn't seem like it was the star, the focus, the center of attention of the movie, but boy, did he take a lot of scenes time.
He really did, and I think that it's not his fault. I just think that it was the choices of the filmmaker's fault. With that twist, I mean, we'll get into that a little bit later about the problem that I have with that. But going along with the other acting, a lot of this just felt kind of wooden to me, and it also felt very out of place. You know, with the three witches and everything, let's talk about them a little bit. Just none of them felt natural to me.
No, they didn't seem to have any chemistry or really click with each other.
No.
You know, it was set up as like they're three members of this team, and they all have their special talent or element to them to help guide these kids, and they just talked.
No,
and it didn't even feel like they were talking to each other. There were times where it's just like, man, I wonder if Reese Witherspoon and Oprah have even met, because it didn't even look like they were filming together.
No,
you know,
they didn't, and that's also with like just their characters in general, with their costumes, the way they were trying to deal with the costumes and what they had to do with them. And then at times, Oprah's like the size of a building, and they're not. I'm like, this is throwing me off. This is just weird that she's looming back there as a building, and they're all running around. I think there was a lot of bad choices when it comes to the casting. I'm not sure if they just wanted to be diverse and, you know, different with lots of different actors. But for me, it just didn't seem like anyone was really putting in the effort.
Reese Witherspoon, she's an Oscar winner. She's the only one I'm not worried about. And I think of the three, she gave the weakest performance. It was like she was trying to be the comic relief of the movie, but I just feel like the jokes didn't land, the timing was off, and I just got to say, going into the timing and everything, the editing and pacing of this movie leaves a lot to be desired. Because I think it has a strong first act. I think it gets the story going, and it kind of like puts you in the right place to feel for these characters. And then at the third act, I think the third act kind of worked too. But the second act, like getting there from all the way to Z.
That's supposed to be the adventure.
Yeah, that's supposed to be the meat of the movie. And you're right, it's supposed to be the adventure. And at no time did I really feel like I was on the adventure.
No, it seemed like missed opportunities along the way a lot, especially with different locations they went to and different characters you met along the way. There's supposed to be like almost surprise reveals with new characters and things like that, but they didn't even seem like they wanted them to like. It almost was like dial it down. Zach Galifianakis is in a point. It seems like, why is Zach Galifianakis going into this so dialed down? Like, give me comedy, give me something that's funny or entertaining. But instead, it was just kind of bland and boring. Yeah. And going again with the pacing, I agree with you. I think it was ill-paced, but the direction of this movie, man, like, get out of my face. These people, it was sort of like what you said about Mother, you know? It was just like this the whole time.
Ava DuVernay really tried hard to make like this a spectacle, kind of like big event movie, and it never at any point really felt like that. It felt like just CGI backdrop, CGI here, CGI there kind of thing. But however, I do think she nailed it when it came to the emotional beats of the movie.
Yeah, I think
there's a very sentimental, emotional beginning to it. You know, like she established well the connection between the girl and her father.
Sure.
And then I think when they reunited, I thought that was a good moment too at the end.
Yep.
But I just think all the technical stuff, the storytelling, even with some of the dialogue editing, like there's just like weird like interjections. It's kind of jarring and throws you off a little bit, and just like takes you out of the scene. It's like, what's going on with this movie?
Yeah, I agree, and I think that there's a lot of themes that they try to explore here, especially for kids. But they couldn't seem to quite land on one. They do land on a theme, kind of. But at times I'm like, is this about not being a bully? Or is this about family is important? Or is this about like loving yourself? Or is this about like not really realizing what your style is yet? Like they were just all over the board with this.
There's one character who just like blurts his arc at the end.
Yeah.
Like it would be the equivalent to like after they blow up the Death Star, like when Han, Leia, and Luke are reunited, Han's just like, oh boy, I was a lonesome smuggler who only thought about myself. This adventure made me realize that something's bigger than me and worth fighting for.
I just want to touch on the villain and the lack thereof. There is like an entity of darkness that is actually the antagonist in this, but there never really seems to be an antagonist. There's nothing for them to be battling that much. It always seems like just situational. They're at this place, they're wondering where they are, and then they figure it out and they move to a new place. There never seemed like anything menacing until the end, which I guess we won't spoil it, but it just, I never felt like there was that much of a threat. I felt like it was more of a time crunch than a threat.
Right, and they try to explain what this threat is, what the villain is, but at never at any point you really feel its presence in the movie.
I think it's just a dumb metaphorical villain. Just being like, we're just going to use the villain as a metaphor. You don't actually get to see anything. It's just something we all feel.
Yeah, and you're right. I don't know what theme they're trying to nail. Like, is it about loving your family, appreciating who you are, not being afraid of your flaws? It was just kind of spread all over the place, and I just wish they would have landed on one theme.
Me too.
Buffs.
All right, Nate, we shared our feelings on A Wrinkle in Time, but why don't you go ahead and give me your score?
Yeah, there's not much to like for me with this film, and if it is supposed to be directed towards kids and dumbed down, I'm not going to use that as a crutch to give it a better score, because what this is to me just sloppy filmmaking and sloppy storytelling. So I'm going to go pretty low with this, with a 4.5 out of 10. I just don't really see much redeeming factors of this movie.
Yeah, this movie is very messy. There are a few moments that I enjoyed, and, out of all the performances, I guess, like, Chris Pine's always reliable to give a good performance, but, he's hardly in the movie. And I just feel like it was very ambitious. It was a noble effort, but the execution left a lot to be desired. So I'm going to give A Wrinkle in Time a 4 out of 10. It might be you might enjoy it if you read the book or are familiar with the source material. Otherwise, it's just kind of sloppy.
Buffs.
All right, so that's it for our review of A Wrinkle in Time. What'd you guys think of the movie? Is it more enjoyable if you've read the book? Why don't you go ahead and leave a comment down below.
Yeah, next week we'll be bringing you our review of Tomb Raider. So can it break the bad video game movie streak? Let's just hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, well, let's not put too high expectations. Just take what they give us.
Exactly. So we'll bring you that review next week. But don't forget,
There's no place like the theater.